Hi, everyone. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to leave my notes here, so just in case. Thank you, everyone. It really is exciting to be here. And when John and Letha asked me to speak, I didn't understand why. They didn't want me to speak about the stuff I usually speak about, which is innovation and making innovation accessible to everyone. They wanted me to speak about my leadership style, which is kind of odd. And they then told me the topic of the conference was rebellion. And so I really didn't connect the two together very well because I couldn't understand how what I did was rebellious. But I will tell you, doing my research and doing my homework, it is, interestingly enough. So let me tell you about, this is about, I'm going to talk about creative leadership. Now, I'm not going to tell you the 10 steps of how to insert creativity into your business because you've all seen that speech. You've probably given that speech. You've read that book. That's not what this is about at all. What this is about really is how you can lead and guide creative people so that you get really the best work. And you can use that creativity that to me is so precious when you find those incredible people, and you can use that to do great things. So I've really spent my professional career, Letha gave you a little bit about it, but my whole professional career has really been trying to convince businesses that creativity mattered, that there was a huge return on investment in creativity. And I'm happy to say, I don't have to do that anymore. People really do accept that, which is great, because I think in today's world, what creative people bring to the party in terms of solving these complex problems, in terms of really looking at all of the things out there, businesses want creative people in their wheelhouse. They want them to do wonderful things. But with that comes some of the creative personality, and I have a lot of people I've worked with out there that are creative, so I'm going to say things, and I hope I don't insult you, but it just is a reality. Creatives can be temperamental, moody. They kind of keep odd hours. They get bored really easily. I mean, these are just parts of all the things that you want in a creative person to be able to do are things you also have to manage. And here's really, that's kind of the funny side of it. The truth is, the drivers that drive a creative person are not necessarily the drivers that drive a business person, and so there lies oftentimes a disconnect. And what I'm really big on is not having a checkbox. I'm a business, I hired a creative person, I have designers, I accept that creativity and design thinking is all part of my business now. What you really want is you want people to be able to use that and use that in a way that really drives the best value. So I would like to think that successful businesses that have creative people, whether they're nonprofits or big businesses or startups, use creative people in a way that gets the most benefit, that drives a great product, that brings something to life. So, okay, Letha told you a little bit about my background. Let me expand and why I could even talk about this and why this matters to me. So here's the great thing. I'm not at all creative, interestingly enough. I work in a company called Quirky. I'm the president of Quirky. I don't know if any of you are part of our community. We make invention accessible. We have 1 million+ users. But the interesting thing is we get to really design over 100 products a year. About 50 of those go to market. So I have this phenomenal team of creative people that I work. I'm not really a business person either. So I didn't study business in school. But I did run Frog, and I took Frog, was a very little. When I went to go join Frog, it was 30 people, very small little boutique firm. And over the course of several years, really grew it to what I think is a tremendous powerhouse of innovation and creativity. So how does this work? I'm not necessarily creative. I don't really have any business background. But I think my eclectic background, perhaps, has aided in why I'm able to lead these successful creative businesses and really help people grow and bring value to other businesses that I work with. So and I think in today's world, that becomes something that's really, really, really important because the world is not linear anymore. The world is very complex. Of course, that wasn't the case 20 years ago, right, or 15 years ago. If you had looked at a background like mine, okay, majored in theater in college and studied film and communications, and yeah, did film work and worked in marketing and was a COO, kind of operations person. Somebody looking at that resume would have said, yeah, loser. Like, what are you doing? But I do think today, in our world that is so multinational, and I know in our world, when you're designing products and services, and you have to design for this really very diverse background. And you really have to understand people, and you have to understand different situations. And to me, the core of all of that, which is where this is going, is empathy. Now, all of my professional career, people have told me that I had high emotional intelligence. For the longest time, I thought they just thought I was smart. But the reality is that's not necessarily the case. So, you know, empathy is really the ability to understand someone else's feelings, right? And emotional intelligence is, one core of that is empathy. Another core to that is really understanding how to use that to make good decisions, to guide and direct people. So I kind of found this interesting. As I started doing research for this speech, I really dug into this emotional intelligence, because what does that mean? Daniel Goleman kind of wrote this definitive book in 1995 on emotional intelligence, which, by the way, I've never read, but I did read in preparation for this. And it was really interesting because I could identify with a lot of the things. In 1998, he wrote a great article, Harvard Business Review, called What Makes a Leader? And he really applied these tenets of emotional intelligence to what makes a good leader. And what he said really was, you don't necessarily sympathize with your employees. That's not what this is about. But you use the feelings and the emotions of your employees to really guide your thinking. What's interesting about that is your employees really appreciate that. It's not like, you know, you're just going to take their side and run with it, but they appreciate the fact that you've really understood them and you really took the time to care. So I got really fascinated with this whole emotional intelligence once I dove in, and I started looking at a couple of the other things that Goleman did, and he had these 5 tenets. One was self-regulation, the ability for you to be able to control your moods. So did you ever walk into a room and somebody's in a really bad mood, and like everybody's in a bad mood then because they've kind of ruined the moment? So as a leader, that really influences people, and you have to be really careful about that. And then the self-regulation, it's like, what are your bad tendencies? How are you not going to make sure that your bad tendencies infiltrate an entire organization? And then the concept of motivation. Does it go beyond just, you know, fame and power and money? Is it the passion for what you do? Do you love what you do? Then empathy, of course, understanding someone else's feelings. And the last one is really these kind of social skills. How do you use all this to network, really, to bring together the organization, to bring together a group? So this was really fascinating because I looked at those things and I went, wow, that's me. I didn't know that. That was kind of cool. And I thought, well, there must be just tons of people. And this whole thing about emotional intelligence and empathy, it's all over. Like, this is great. This is leadership. Oh my God, that's so not the case. Do you know what people think about people who lead with emotional intelligence, who lead with empathy? I've read these quotes. They consider them wimps, losers, soft. So then I started thinking back. A few years ago, there was a kind of a changeover in the parent company of my old company, and they started giving us all these psychological tests. I'd never had one. I was afraid what I was going to find out. But nonetheless, one was about leadership. There's a whole section on leadership. So the person that had administered the test, like 5 weeks later, sat us in a room. It was very formal, sat me down and said, well, you've scored off the charts in leadership. Okay, well, that's good, right? Yeah, but we've really never seen your type of leadership. I said, well, what does that mean? I mean, company's successful, things are doing really well. You've got, happy employees, work product is great. Yeah, but that's just not really the traditional way we see leaders act. So I found that really, it's like, wow, that's really interesting. So I kind of slunk out of there because I don't really know how to do it any other way. So I'm going to just continue to do what I do. And maybe I'm never going to fit in that place. But this has really been something I've thought a lot about because I look at businesses and I thought, I think successful businesses out there, a lot of them use empathy. They may not talk about it. They might not talk about the emotional intelligence, but they use it to do great things and to get good business results. So I did some research, as you do for these talks. And I found two that really kind of fit outside the wheelhouse of what you would think is an empathetic, emotional company. So one is Google. I'm sorry for anybody who works at Google. I'm not saying you don't care, but that's the empathetic side of me coming out. But it was really interesting. Between 2000 and 2011, they had an enormous amount of women leaving the company, right? So they had this attrition that was going through, and they did a lot of research. And what they looked at everything. They looked at everything from interviewing to training and development. And a couple of things kept coming back to them. One was their maternity leave policy. At the time, it was 3 months off with half-time pay. And what they saw is women weren't coming back. They also saw it as a deterrent to hiring women. They also saw in the interview process, there were very few female interviewers. There were very few females that were in the interview process actually doing the interviewing. And then in training and development, they saw there was really a lack of mentorship for women. And so in 2012, they adjusted all that. They changed their maternity leave policy to 5 months off with full-time pay. They added females managers into the interview process. And they began an extensive training and development and mentorship with senior female leaders mentoring and working with younger female employees. Lo and behold, attrition was cut in half, and their ability to retain and keep women has worked. So to me, when I looked at that, what they did was they understood what their employees were thinking. They understood what was driving people, and they made adjustments to that. That's all empathy. That's all using that emotional intelligence. And guess what? They got better business results. So another company I looked at, IBM, again, not the typical company you would think you could relate to having emotional intelligence. And again, to anybody out working for IBM, this is a positive. So in today's world, we all talk about personalization, one-to-one, being able to relate to your customer. How do you do that? And as IBM was transitioning from this services business, from this manufacturing business to a services business, this became an issue for them. How are they going to show the world that they were more human? How are they going to show the world that they could relate to customers? They were a manufacturer. So it was interesting, you think about IBM and all the resources, they could have done it a few ways, right? They could have hired any celebrity spokesperson to go out there and talk about it at great length. They could have blown up a huge ad campaign where their CEO went out and told them how human they were. But what I liked about what they did in this case was they did what they knew how to do, and they built a machine, right? They built a computer. But this wasn't just any computer. This was Watson. Everybody knows Watson, artificially intelligent computer that can answer questions. And at that time, what they built Watson to do, Watson could play Jeopardy. So how was that going to humanize IBM? Well, they convinced Jeopardy to let Watson play against 2 Jeopardy champions. So Alex Trebek, I'm sure you're old Jeopardy watchers, but he is the host of Jeopardy. Alex Trebek would ask Watson a question, as well as the 2 other contestants, and you'd see the camera cutting, and there were these wonderful deliberations for Watson and the contestants, and going back and forth. And what was interesting about this, lo and behold, the weirdest thing happened. The audience actually started rooting for Watson. Watson became a hero. So the ratings of Jeopardy went through the roof. The audience really, just fell in love with Watson. Watson won, by the way, in case you all don't know the end of the story. Watson did win. And what was interesting was IBM was able to humanize this machine, and by virtue of that, humanize the brand. And what they saw is right after that airing, in that next quarter, their analytics services business went up 20%. And so again, they were able to understand human is a totally different idea than what Google did, but they were able to understand humanizing something, a machine in this case, and what that means to their brand. And by the way, Watson still has quite a career, and I understand now. I watched this Nova special on Watson. Watson now picks fashion trends, also does scientific analytics, but can cook out of a food truck. That part I would like to see. So in my world, I'm in the design world. In my world, designers are they are ethnographers. They are cultural anthropologists. They do extensive field research. They're trying to find out who are they designing something for? And is there a real world need for it? And so the reality is that's empathy in its purest form. They're walking in somebody else's shoes. They're seeing where the issues and the problems are. And it's good business. It's an efficient way to do business. I knew, after all the years of doing this, I've seen so many instances where when our creative teams and our designer teams are able to do that, and we allow them to do that, they find just incredible answers. And sometimes they find answers that people don't want. There isn't a product or a service there. But that's good too. So to me, empathy is great business. And I'm not sure why it's not practiced more. Where I work, where I've always worked, one of the things I do all the time is I try to take the loneliness out of going to work every day. Because I understand that people have lives outside of work. I'll ask people about their children, their significant others, their interest outside of work, their hobbies. And you make note of things, oh, the child's sick. Oh, they've got parents that are ill. Oh, they want to take off an extra day to go skydiving. By the way, creative people love that part of the world. Always scares me, but you take that all into account, because I really believe the journey between work and life is very short. They're really united together these days. What I see more and more is people don't want to go to work and just know about balance and budget sheets or what your profits are going to be. They want meaning. I know that's really true in the creative space, but I've got to assume most of you here also feel that. You want meaning from your life. And so I think from a leadership perspective, we have to allow people to bring their personal life into their work life, which is totally opposite to what everybody ever teaches you. And we as leaders have to acknowledge that there is a life outside of work. And what's interesting about that is you will get more loyalty from your employees. People will be more creative, more driven to work, and by virtue, you'll get a better product. So I'll leave you with this. Every day, start today. Bring a human touch into what you do at work. I guarantee you that your employees and your business and you will be better off for it. So thank you very much.